it's Lezli. Thanks for joining us for our On the Yard edition of Impolite Conversation, where we explore race, culture, and societal issues through the lens of HBCU students. On the Yard happens every Friday. Hi there, it's Lezli. Thanks for joining us for our On the Yard edition of Impolite Conversation.
I'm today's co-host, Nava Levene Harvell, a rising sophomore at Spelman College. Last Friday, we explored two white students' experiences at Hampton University. Today, we're going to chat with two Nigerian students about their experiences at their respective HBCUs. So I'll let you two introduce yourselves.
My name is Amelia Ayomoh. I am Nigerian and I go to Philander Smith College in Little Rock, Arkansas. I'm a rising sophomore and I'm a social work major.
Hi there, my name is Divine Linus. I'm a rising sophomore, computer science major from Morehouse College. I'm an international student from Nigeria, and I'm so glad to be in the podcast this evening.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
How did you first learn about Morehouse and Philander Smith, and why did you decide to attend an HBCU?
I heard about Morehouse College and other HBCUs from a website called blackcolleges.com. So it's the common application for colleges and universities in the United States, but it was specifically for HBCUs. So I learned about Morehouse College as being the all-black male college in Atlanta, Georgia. By reading this website and by watching YouTube videos, I felt like this is a place I can call home other than my country. And understanding the racial tensions going on in America, I felt like I want to be in a space where I can feel comfortable in my own skin, in my own identity. So I decided to apply to almost 10 HBCUs, including Morehouse College, Howard University, Tuskegee University, Alcorn State University, and also Philander Smith College. I decided to go for Morehouse College because of, not just its prestige, but its idea of developing men into leaders.
How did you find out about the website, though?
What made you even decide you wanted to research HBCUs?
Right.
I actually had a dream in 2017 that I was studying abroad in an all-black space. The dream wasn't clear back then. I really didn't understand what it meant, maybe another African country, but it was specifically in the United States. So I went online and began to browse about schools that has more Black students. I began to find about schools that are highly populated in African-American students because honestly, I really love the African-American culture and African-American lifestyle. All the homecoming and all the matching bands and everything I watch in media is so interested me. And I began to browse about schools with more African-American population. And I found about HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. And that was how I got to know about the name HBCU.
Right.
Fabulous.
I went to the embassy in Nigeria, and through them, Education USA, they really helped other Nigerians like me figure out and navigate through the application process for universities in the US. I actually applied to a pretty equal amount of both white colleges and HBCUs. And I had applied to Philander because I had a cousin there and she told me about it. Looking at all my universities, I was like, okay, what do I want? I wanted that feeling of home. I wanted a small university.
How did your friends back home respond when you shared that you would be attending an HBCU? Did you have to explain what it was?
Right.
For me, I told them, hey, I'm going to study in the United States. And it didn't matter what kind of college or what kind of university I was going to. All that matters was I'm going to further my education in the United States. When they found out it's an all-black male college, and then they were like, how are you going to cope? But that was all. I didn't have any convincing to tell them, this is why I want to go to HBCU. This is why a HBCU is the best fit for me. So I just told them I'm going abroad to study.
Okay. And Amelia, how about you?
I explained to them I want to go to a HBCU primarily because I want a space where I don't have to be scared that someone's going to be racist to me, because racism isn't something I've ever had to experience because I'm from Nigeria and everyone's Black. I hadn't been exposed to that kind of experience, and it's not one that I ever really wanted to go through. they're my friends. So they're going to support me, whatever decision I make.
I noticed that you were nodding your head a lot while Amelia was speaking about why it was she decided to choose an HBCU over a PWI. One of the important factors was racism. Do you feel like you share that same sentiment?
I wanted a place where I won't be judged or be looked down upon because I'm Black. So coming down to HBCU, I felt like since a HBCU is mainly populated by African Americans, Black people, I feel like I won't stand out so differently from others.
So what have your experiences been like as international students?
When I came into the United States, the interner who was over international student affairs come pick me up from the airport. He helped me get situated. And then I remember the night when we were going back on campus, I was like, this is Morehouse College. Morehouse College I've been seeing on the TV, on the news, on YouTube. I'm finally in this space. I can't believe my eyes with all the fastings and all the prayers and all the people praying on my behalf. I can't believe this is now a reality. So when I stepped my foot in Morehouse, I found out that even though I was Black, I saw so much differences from every other person I had an encounter with or someone I talked with. When I was going down to my dorm, I stayed at Hubert. I had this, friends, these brothers who were calling me, "Oh, you, what you're doing? It's time to do this." And I wasn't understanding them at that time because, of course, the accents was kind of foreign to me. I was like, "What are you saying? Can you repeat yourself all over again?" They were talking pretty fast. The frequency in which they were talking was way different from what I have been used to. And even when I tried to talk, I tried to explain myself. The first thing they ask me is, "Where you from?" They won't even want to pay attention to listen to me. The first thing they ask you is, "Where you from?" I stand up in the class to give a speech or introduce myself. The first thing is, "Hey, where you from?" And it kind of helped make me feel like, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to fit in here. You asking me every time, where am I from? I go to the lunch lady's asking me, "Can you speak louder? Can you speak well? I can hear you." I'm like, oh my goodness. How am I going to cope in this place? I remember a couple of times I applied for some contests and stuff like that. Sometimes, even when I'm talking, they'd be like, can you try to imitate the American accents? Can you try to say it this kind of way? Right? And I'll just smile about it. I'm like, well, you're trying to make me lose my identity to fit in. You're trying to make me lose who I am as an African. So if it was not for the little international community we had, and try to ask them, how was your experiences the first time you came in here? And how did you cope? How did you find yourself acclimatized into this environment? And I try to learn how they did it and try to implement it in my social life. Because the first and foremost thing that they see, other than your Blackness or other than your race, is your ethnicity. We all look Black. We all look like we're the same. We all dress similar. But then when you talk or when you're in a social setting, because I try to join and get myself engaged in clubs and organizations, and when everyone is contributing and everyone is laughing and stuff, and I try to say something, it just gets utterly quiet. They're trying to understand what I just said because it sounds so foreign to them. That was the first semester I arrived. In the second semester, I found myself acclimatizing really fine because I had brothers who were ready to help me out, to make me feel welcome, to make me feel like this is home. That is the thing about Morehouse. We're not just on individualism, but we're more of a collective institution where everyone is made to feel at home.
I came in with my cousins who are Nigerian too. We attend the same school. And a lot of my friends too who are Nigerian. We were just like, do you understand what they're saying? So I was like, why can't I understand them? And then I realized when white people would speak to me, I'd understand them. And then I was like, oh, back home in TV shows, maybe you don't see a lot of Black people on TV. It's for white people. So I'm like, yeah, that's why I don't understand. I got to know so many different slangs. I remember in my dorm, one of the African American friends I made, I went to her like, what? Wait, what's finna? Like, what are you saying? And she laughed and she was like, you don't know what finna is? And I'm like, no, I don't. Can you explain? And from there, I started learning all the slangs. It was just really amazing to me to find out how someone from New York talks a bit different and has a totally different slang from someone in Arkansas. And it's so good because you get to appreciate and experience different cultures. Then later on, I also met Bahamians, Jamaicans, and we couldn't understand each other. But with time, she started teaching me about her country. I started teaching her about mine. We watched movies to educate ourselves, and it was just beautiful to experience.
To add on to what Amelia just said, The African American accent was also a challenge because I could hear someone from Georgia say something in a different way from someone from New York or Philadelphia. So they all have different accents, and I'm trying to grasp what this person said with his slangs and also understand, is it the same thing with what this person is saying? So coming from Africa, even if we're diverse as an African continent, we have Nigerians, we have Ghanaians, I could still relate with what a Ghanaian is saying. I could still relate what a Zambian is saying. But, coming into the United States, they're all in the same country, but still have so many and different slangs and different accents in the way they interact with people.
I think it's interesting. Both of you said you couldn't understand African American vernacular English because you're so used to, actually, Amelia said it on the TV, it's white people. And it's white people speaking English from Philadelphia, from Boston, maybe from California. Maybe you've seen Texas, like the Cowboy Rangers thing, and you understand what people from the South sound like. But it's not as common to hear someone speaking African American vernacular and you hear that and you're like, yeah, no.
Yeah, and now that I think about it, the only two shows that were purely African American that I had watched while in Nigeria was Medea and The Cosby Show.
Completely different.
Right. When Black Panther was released in 2018, that was probably the first time I saw the notion of there being tension between African Americans and continental Africans being discussed in mainstream publications and outlets. Literally every outlet was dissecting this relationship between African Americans and continental Africans. I even remember there was a panel discussion that someone posed a question, where was Wakanda during slavery? It was a very interesting time when Black Panther came out. Do you think that there is tension? And if so, how has that played out in your experiences?
This is the honest truth. There are some Africans, and it may not be their fault because the way the media portrays African Americans is really terrible. I know Africans that genuinely feel like African Americans, they're violent, and every African American is walking around with a gun ready to kill the next person, the next thing that moves. And it's not like they do it with malicious intent. It's just what they were made to believe because that's what they see when they turn on the TV. I remember this movie, Black AF.
And the show on Netflix.
There were a group of Africans passing by the main character. He said, oh, yeah, they don't talk to us because they think they're better than us because they didn't get sold. And I was like, wow, we're all the same skin color. You are us. I hate the term African American so much that I feel like they don't want you to feel like you're American. They want to say, oh, Africa, you're from Africa, you're not from here. Why don't they call white people European Americans? If it's like that, Native Americans should just be called Americans, and the rest of us, you tie back to the continent you were from. There's no need for people to feel like one is better than the other. We're all Africans. The only difference, to be honest, is that you were born here. Because if my parents had immigrated to America, I would talk the same way you talk, act just like you, look like you. So what's the difference? There's no reason for any tension to be there in the first place.
You said that you noticed that some of your Nigerian or just African friends noticed that there was either some bias or some harsh feelings against African Americans. Would you feel like you've seen the other side of that?
I realized that the Africans who thought like that, who had that animosity, it was because they were fed stereotypes about African Americans. The African Americans were acting that way because they had stereotypes about Africans. So it was basically just both sides. There's people who have even asked me, like, how come you speak English? How did you get here? I had African American friends who literally told me that. And in their innocent mind, they never knew that Africans wore clothes.
I don't know about that one. I don't know.
At first, I would be bitter about it and upset because I'm like, you're coming from my country. I'm proud of where I come from. I'm proud of my continent. And we don't have animals just roaming the streets and giraffes in my backyard.
Writing lines from school. I think people on the same side, how before you came here, it was Medea and the Cosby Show. It's very much of for $5 a day, you can feed this family starving in Africa on the TV. And if you do see a good representation of money and wealth in Africa, they're either scammers or being terrible to people. There's no in between.
Or they're just like royalty, like there's no middle class.
By the way, Madea was also my favorite show back home in Nigeria. And I always love BET Plus, because it teaches us so much about African American culture and so much of the African Americans that the media doesn't show us. Coming down to the tension of Africans and African Americans don't understand what African Americans has been through in the country. We feel like, how can you be in a country where there's land of opportunities and you can't make something out for yourself? You feel like, well, you guys have been here all your life. You guys were born here, but still, we come in here and we do things better than you guys. That is a stereotypical idea Africans have about African Americans. But they don't understand. They haven't been through all the systemic racism that African Americans have gone through in America. They don't understand how they built up a new culture for themselves. It all comes down to what the media has been depicting of African Americans. Most of the times when I was back home, I watched investigations, discovery shows and CNN and stuff. And then you realize you don't see much crimes that were committed by white Americans. But most of the time, you see mugshots of African American men on CNN, on other news channels, telling you a black man did this, a black man did that. And you ask yourself, is it that white Americans don't commit crime? But they do, but no one is depicting them on the media. So the media has a very powerful way, or had a powerful way to play in the depiction of what we see about African Americans. And trust me, once you see something, you hear something, you put that thing in your mind, and then you carry it along. This is what African Americans, this is who they are. But that is not who they are. Over the years, the media tells them when you go to Africa, you're going to see poverty. You can't see wealth. You will see animals. You will see them rearing animals in the forest. And then they depict the idea, oh, Africans are poor. Africans don't know English. Africans don't do this. Africans don't do that, right? So now that has brought about a tension between African Americans and Africans. That is why I always tell Africans, go to a HBCU. When you go to HBCU, you will understand that all the things you've seen, all the things you've been told is not actually it. You'll find educated African American men and women who know their worth. It is better to be in that space and understand it and see the real thing yourself and experience it firsthand than someone telling you, someone who hasn't ever been to America. Because I have my grandparents were telling me, oh, when you go to America, have company, make sure you find white people you relate with because they're going to help you succeed more than African Americans. But they have never been to America before. They don't know what America looks like. And they're telling me what to do when I get to America. It all comes down to the media. It is so very powerful in Africa in the depiction of what African American people are.
I think the takeaway is it's important to experience these things firsthand rather than have somebody give you an opinion. Currently, our country is in the midst of protests. The Black Lives Matter movement has brought to the forefront not just police violence against Black people, but many of the issues Black people in this country face because of systemic racism. Has attending an HBCU given you more insight into these issues? Do you feel any closer to them now?
I've never experienced racism before. My Black friends who are in schools that are not HBCUs, they've had the school security called on them. People have literally asked him if he was really going to that school. I had to educate Africans. These people have been oppressed for 400 years. You can't tell someone who's experienced this kind of pain, why are you feeling this way? Why don't you just forget about it? I call that African privilege because you've never had the experience of someone treating you unfairly specifically because you're a different race. That's why you have that privilege to feign ignorance, but that's where it ends. I tell my friends all the time, you can feel like you're white, but you're not. When you're here, no one's gonna ask you before being racist, are you African or are you African American? There's no difference.
I have friends who say, oh, the Black Lives Matter is just an African American thing. A white person is not going to see you as African or as a Caribbean. They only see you for your skin color, for your race, Black. Because actually, even in applications, if you're trying to apply for college or you're applying for something, in the checkbox, you're not going to mention African, you're going to mention Black or African American. because you're Black in America. You only claim your African identity outside the United States, or maybe you go to the EU. But in the United States, they don't see your nativity, they don't see your ethnicity, they only see you for being Black. You see the Black man going to a very prestigious institution, just like she said, and then they think, oh, he's not smart enough or he's not rich enough to afford this institution of this school. And then they begin to, racial profile him. I think you're in here is just to cause trouble. Before you tell the cops, I'm African, I'm not Black, I'm not African American,
You're already dead.
you're already
Nobody
done.
cares.
You're already killed. So whatever identity we claim to have cannot be far enough from being Black, because that is all we are. Even if I'm light skinned as an African, I'm still Black. So it's very imperative for us to fight the good fight. The Black Lives Movement is so important because that is the foundation for every other thing that we are trying to do. I mean, if your life don't matter for being Black, then there's no way you're going to say, oh, I'm trying to go to college and trying to get this job. I'm trying to achieve this ladder of success, because you're still going to find some discrimination, racism out there. So you better hit it right at the nail, right from the beginning of it, and try to join hands with the African Americans, because it's so important that we join hands in the movement.
When I was a senior, I might have been a junior in college, there was a really big case in New York. This was when Rudy Giuliani, do you know who Rudy Giuliani is? Rudy Giuliani used to be the mayor of New York City. And there was a really huge case, kind of like the George Floyd of right now. And his name was Amadou Diallo. He lived in either Brooklyn or Queens. I'm pretty sure it was Brooklyn. West African immigrant. He was walking into his building and I think he reached for his cell phone and the police shot him 42 times. 42 times. And not one police officer lost their job. So to your point, they're not asking whether or not you're West African. They're not asking what your ethnicity is. They just see you as being Black. And I'll never forget his mother crying out his name. I mean, he was unarmed. The man had a cell phone.
Circling back to Black Lives Matter and highlighting anti-Black racism, many people don't know this, but Black immigrants are disproportionately deported. The year after Trump took office, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, better known as ICE, reported a drop in total number of overall removals except for African migrants, who have seen a spike in the number of people sent back home. And in many cases, more than doubling from the previous year. Due to the over-policing of Black neighborhoods, Black immigrants are more likely to encounter law enforcement. Although only 7% of non-citizens in the U.S. are Black, they make up 20% of those facing deportation. So obviously you guys are not undocumented. You're here on student visas. But we do know that these ICE raids and immigration policies are nothing more than institutionalized racism. This week, ICE announced international students need to leave the United States if their college or university is online-only learning due to COVID. Institutions are finding creative ways to protect their international students. But is it a real concern for either of you?
My anxiety has been astronomical because it's just me waiting to know what my fate is going to be. As long as you're international in the US, everything is 2 times harder for you. And on top of that, I'm Black.
So for me, I don't have a problem because Morehouse is catering for their international community this fall. However, I actually have concerns with some of my friends who are facing the scare of deportation. He's like, after all the prayers and after all the sacrifices he made, he is right now on the bridge of getting deported back to his country.
Right. Yeah, it's a double-edged sword because it's on one end, online, everybody's safe and you face deportation. Other hand, you're fine, but America has one of the highest number of cases. So staying safe is very important.
So I pray that ICE, they are not able to enforce this and hopefully Trump is voted out in November. That is the most important thing.
And defund ICE.
Yes.
So as you know, this is a cultural podcast curated by the Iconoclast Dinner Experience. This is my last question that we ask all of our podcast guests. It's your last night on Earth. Where are you eating and why?
19 years in Nigeria, and I'm already used to everything. So I would want to explore something, unique. I might want to go to Peru or the UK.
I love traveling, so I don't think I'd want to be anywhere that I've already been. So I feel like I'm going to go to Greece.
I just want to give a shout out to my friend who is an African American guy. I stayed with him for a couple of weeks, and he taught me so much how to make cornbread, greens, mashed potato, and all the African American meals. And I just hope to go back to Nigeria someday and tell them, hey, mom, I know how to make greens and cornbread and, and fried chicken.
I love it.
So, yeah.
I love the fact that you two are a bridge between your African friends and family and your African American friends. I love that you're bridging that cultural gap.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. It was great to chat with you guys and learning more about your experiences at Morehouse and Philander Smith. Good luck to you guys next semester. One last thing. Breonna Taylor was killed by police in her home in March of 2020. The officers have yet to be arrested. Please take a look at our show notes on ways you can help.
Thank you for listening to Impolite Conversation, the podcast, curated by the Iconoclast Dinner Experience. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Icon Dinner and on the Iconoclast Dinner Experience Facebook page. Let us know what you thought about this episode. Hit us on socials or send us feedback at press@iconoclastdinner.com. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to our podcast, and we'd also love it if you rated and reviewed us.